Hi, I'm Thien from City Lights Church, Orange County. City Lights, we've been studying Philippians in the Bible in a series we're calling Unshakable Joy. This week we're studying Philippians chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. The theme of Philippians is how to have more joy in your life. That's something that we all want to experience. Like, who doesn't want to experience more joy and contentment and fulfillment in their lives? But the question is, why are we so full of worry and stress and frustration? Well, you got to understand that there are two primary enemies of joy. It's crisis and conflict. Crisis and conflict. In the past several weeks, we talked about how we deal with crisis. How do we go through a difficulty and still maintain our joy? And we said that the main thing that we do is when you face hardship and difficulty is you need to trust Jesus. You need to trust that Jesus is powerful and in control, that Jesus has a purpose for that situation you're going through. You got to trust that Jesus is present in your time of difficulty. So how do you get through a crisis is you have to get through it in faith. But the second question is, how do you deal with relational conflict? You know, it's really difficult to be joyful when you are in a relational conflict. When someone's mad at you or when you're mad at someone else, it just ruins your day. It's really difficult to still be joyful when you are in relational conflict. So the question is, how do we deal with conflict and how do we have more joy in our relationships? First, you need to understand where conflict comes from. That the primary source of relational conflict is our pride and selfishness. That our pride and selfishness is the enemy that will rob us of our good relationships. This is what Pastor Andy Stanley said. He says, you need to kill your pride because when you are full of yourself, there is no room for anyone else. In Philippians chapter 2, verse 2 and 3 says, make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being of one spirit and of one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Did you hear that? It says, do nothing out of selfish ambition and vain conceit. Selfish ambition is saying it's all about me, that we're self-centered, we're the center of our own worlds. Vain conceit is saying, I'm always right. It's my way. You got to realize that the secret to great relationships that is satisfying and joyful is to follow the example of Jesus in his humility. In verse 5 it says, in your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus. In your relationships, think about it the way Jesus thinks about it. Have the same mindset, the same perspective. If you want to experience joy in your relationships, you cannot allow your pride and your selfishness to impact those relationships. You actually have to approach it the way Jesus taught it and how he modeled it in his life. He taught and modeled a radical humility in his relationships. That if we follow his example, we'll experience more fulfilling and joyful relationships with those around us. This passage goes on to talk about how Jesus loved and served people, how he humbled himself, how he sacrificed himself. Jesus was selfless in his relationships. Right now, you may be experiencing conflict in your life, but that doesn't mean that you're helpless. There's actually a lot you can do. In this passage, Jesus actually shows us there are 6 things that we can do to begin to experience more joy in our relationships. So what's Jesus' secret for joyful relationships? Number 1 is think well of others. Think well of others. Jesus placed high value on others. In verse 3 it says, in humility, value others above yourself. Like, think of people higher than yourselves. Esteem them higher. Don't put them down. Raise them up. Think well of others. That's what Jesus did. Secondly, put others first. Put others before yourself. Jesus put the needs of other people before his own needs. In verse 4 it says, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. That we need to put others first. If you want more joyful relationships, put others first. Don't just think about yourself. Don't be so selfish. Thirdly, initiate reconciliation. That's what Jesus does. He initiated reconciliation with us. Romans 5:8 says, God demonstrates his love to us in this, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Now, I know that right now you're in a situation where someone has maybe wronged you and you're waiting for them to come to you. And that's not what Jesus did. Even though he was the one that was wronged, he initiated reconciliation. So maybe that's something that we need to do. We need to initiate reconciliation even with those who may have wronged us. Fourthly, we need to release our rights. Release our rights. Jesus didn't demand his rights, but he gave up his rights. In verse 6 it says that he did not consider equality with God something to be held onto or hoarded. So that's what we need to do. We need to release our rights to get even. We need to release our rights to make someone pay for what they did to us. We need to release our right to demand respect. That's what Jesus did. He didn't demand his rights, but he gave up his rights for the benefit of others. Number 5, become a servant. Jesus became a servant. Verse 7, it says that he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant. That he came, he didn't expect people to come and meet his needs, but he came and he wanted to be a blessing to others. He came to serve others. And maybe that's what we need to do. Number 6, sacrifice for others. Jesus sacrificed for us. In verse 8 it says he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death. And maybe that's what we need to do. We need to stop thinking about what people can do for us, but thinking about what we can do for other people. That we should love people and humble ourselves to be able to sacrifice, to give of ourselves to bless someone else. Now, if you're lacking joy in your life right now, most likely it's because you're experiencing some relational conflict in your life. It's because it's very hard to be joyful when someone is mad at you or when you are mad at someone else. If you follow Jesus' example of love and humility and sacrifice in your relationships, you will begin to experience more joy in your life. So what's the secret of joyful relationships? Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceits. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus.